When the HOA told me my 20-foot fishing boat was an eyesore that violated community standards, I had no idea I was about to become the owner of the entire marina they used for their yacht club. That metallic clang you're hearing, that's me locking the gate to what used to be their precious marina, trapping every single one of their fancy yachts behind chain-link fence while they scream in the background. Those same HOA board members who tried to fine me into bankruptcy over my perfectly legal fishing boat are now learning a very expensive lesson about property rights. The salt air mixed with diesel fumes and the crunch of gravel under my boots sounds a lot sweeter when you're holding all the cards and their million-dollar boats aren't going anywhere until they learn some manners. What would you do if your HOA tried to force you out over a boat that was completely legal? Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare like this. Let me back up and tell you how this whole mess started. I'm Jake Thornfield, 45 years old, retired Coast Guard mechanic who just wanted to fish in peace after a divorce that cost me everything except my sanity. When I inherited my uncle's waterfront property in Millbrook Shores, Florida, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Beautiful sunrise view, private dock, and my pride and joy, a 1987 Boston whaler called Rusty Anchor. She's not winning any beauty contests, but that boat purrs like a kitten and has pulled me through more storms than I can count. Millbrook Shores seemed perfect. 200 waterfront homes, quiet streets, the kind of place where your biggest worry should be whether the fish are biting. The salt air mixed with morning coffee on my dock felt like the retirement I'd earned after 20 years of fixing Coast Guard cutters in every kind of weather imaginable. Then I met Priscilla Weatherford. Picture your worst nightmare of an HOA president. 52 years old, 8 years in power, drives a white BMW that's shinier than most people's wedding rings. She's a real estate agent, which explains her obsession with property values and her talent for making people feel like garbage. The woman showed up at my dock one morning wearing designer sunglasses and carrying a clipboard like she was inspecting a crime scene. I should have known right then that trouble was coming. 3 months into paradise, I got my wake-up call, a certified letter that felt like a slap in the face. Violation notice, unsightly marine vessel. My perfectly legal, well-maintained fishing boat apparently violated their aesthetic standards. I had 30 days to remove it or face $200 daily fines. Let me be clear, my boat was cleaner than most people's kitchens and registered properly with the state. But apparently it didn't scream wealthy yacht owner loud enough for Princess Priscilla's taste. I figured this was just a misunderstanding, so I did what any reasonable person would do. I showed up to the next HOA meeting to explain the situation like a civilized human being. Big mistake. The community center smelled like burnt coffee and defeat. Those metal folding chairs squeaked every time someone shifted nervously, and that flickering fluorescent light made everyone look like they were being interrogated by the IRS. Priscilla sat at the head of the table like she was running Fortune 500 board meeting instead of a neighborhood complaint session. When I politely pointed out that my boat was completely legal, she gave me the kind of smile that real estate agents practice in the mirror. "Mr. Thornfield," she said, drumming her blood-red fingernails on that clipboard, "we have community standards to maintain. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in a neighborhood that's more suited to your lifestyle." The way she said lifestyle told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about boats. This was about the fact that I drove a pickup truck instead of a luxury sedan, worked with my hands instead of selling overpriced houses, and didn't fit her vision of the perfect Millbrook Shores resident. She was trying to push me out because I didn't look like her idea of the right kind of neighbor. Looking around that room was like watching a hostage situation. Every single resident sat there avoiding eye contact, afraid to breathe too loud in case they became her next target. These people were living in fear of this woman and her power trips. That's when I realized I wasn't her first victim. She'd probably been bullying people out of this community for years. Well, she just picked a fight with the wrong guy. 20 years in the Coast Guard teaches you how to handle storms, and Priscilla Weatherford was about to learn that some people don't scare easy. I had no idea yet just how big a mistake she'd made, but I was definitely going to enjoy finding out. Priscilla didn't waste any time showing me exactly who I was dealing with. When I missed her ridiculous 30-day deadline because, I was busy researching whether she could actually do this legally, she cranked up the pressure like a drill sergeant having a bad day. The fine jumped from $200 to $500 per day, and suddenly I was looking at serious money just for keeping my own boat on my own property. But that was just her opening move. Within a week, every single person who visited my house got a parking violation. My neighbor borrowed my hedge trimmer, parking violation. Pizza delivery guy stayed 5 minutes too long, another violation. She was treating my property like a surveillance target, probably watching through those designer sunglasses with a stopwatch and a grudge. The woman had turned harassment into an art form. Then she really showed her true colors. Priscilla filed a complaint with the county claiming I was running a commercial fishing operation from my residential property. Complete garbage, but it meant county inspectors showing up at my door asking questions about business licenses I didn't need for a hobby I wasn't commercializing. She was trying to bury me in bureaucratic red tape, hoping I'd give up and move away rather than fight her army of petty violations. The smell of diesel and salt water from my morning boat maintenance became my therapy while I dealt with this insanity. But here's where Priscilla made her first real mistake. She underestimated what 20 years of military paperwork teaches you about fighting bureaucracy. While she was busy playing dictator, I was doing research, real research. I spent every evening at the county courthouse basement, digging through property records that smelled like old newspapers and broken dreams. Those fluorescent lights hummed like angry insects while I photocopied deed after deed, building a picture of exactly what I'd inherited from my uncle. And that's when I found the first piece of gold buried in all that legal language. My uncle's property didn't just include the house and dock. It came with something called riparian rights. Basically, legal access to the waterways that couldn't be taken away by any HOA or neighborhood association. I remembered my uncle always telling me as a kid, "Jake, when you buy waterfront property, always get a title search. You might own more than you think." At the time, I thought he was just being paranoid, but now I understood he was protecting something valuable. These rights were older than Priscilla's entire reign of terror, dating back to when the area was first developed in the 1960s. But even better than that, there was an ancient easement agreement that gave my property special privileges at the Marina. Riparian rights, I learned, are like having a permanent get-out-of-jail-free card for water access. Once you have them, they stick to your property forever unless you specifically sign them away. And my uncle, bless his paranoid heart, never signed away anything. While I was building my legal ammunition, I started making some interesting friends around the neighborhood. Mrs. Bennett, the 78-year-old lady next door, had been watching Priscilla's performance with the kind of quiet rage that only comes from decades of experience with bullies. Turns out she'd been keeping detailed notes about HOA misconduct for years, just waiting for someone brave enough to fight back. "That woman has been terrorizing this neighborhood since she got elected," Mrs. Bennett told me over coffee, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "She pushed out the Martinez family 2 years ago with bogus noise complaints. The Johnsons left after she claimed their vegetable garden violated landscaping standards. You're not her first victim, but maybe you can be her last." The sound of pelicans diving for fish outside my window became the soundtrack to my research sessions. Every splash reminded me why I'd moved here in the first place, for peace, quiet, and the simple pleasure of being left alone. But Priscilla was about to learn that sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous when you push them too far. I also started documenting everything with the kind of precision the Coast Guard had drilled into me over 2 decades. Every phone call got recorded. Something I'd learned was perfectly legal in Florida during a previous property dispute. Every interaction got photographed. Every violation notice got filed with timestamps and witness statements. If Priscilla wanted to play games with paperwork, I'd show her what real documentation looked like. By the end of the first month, I had a stack of evidence thick enough to choke a horse and a growing understanding that this fight was bigger than just my boat. Priscilla had been using HOA rules like weapons for years, and I was sitting on property rights she didn't even know existed. The question was, how far I was willing to take this thing. Looking back, I should have known that quiet guy fixing his boat at sunrise would turn out to be the storm she never saw coming. Priscilla must have sensed she was losing control, because her next move was straight out of the dictator's playbook. She called an emergency HOA meeting to vote on new marina access regulations, claiming my boat created a safety hazard for yacht club members. The woman actually stood there with a straight face saying my 20-foot fishing boat was more dangerous than those floating palaces that half the yacht owners couldn't dock without scraping every piling in sight. The meeting was pure theater. Priscilla waved around freshly printed liability reports while warning about insurance nightmares, her voice dripping with fake concern for community safety. Then she dropped her real bomb, revoking my parking privileges for my boat trailer, claiming it was an unauthorized commercial vehicle despite sitting legally in my own driveway. But that wasn't enough for Princess Priscilla. Within days, whispers started following me everywhere I went. The grocery store cashier giving me weird looks, the gas station attendant asking if I was doing okay. Suddenly, I was the neighborhood's unstable veteran who couldn't handle civilian life. She was poisoning the well, trying to isolate me socially while strangling me legally. While Priscilla was spreading her poison, I was collecting mine. I started showing up to county commissioner meetings, learning interesting things during public comment periods. Turns out several residents had been complaining about the marina for months. Noise violations, environmental issues, yacht owners dumping wastewater and running engines at all hours. Her precious yacht club wasn't exactly the model operation she claimed. So I became the neighborhood's unofficial environmental monitor. Every morning with my coffee, I'd document violations from my dock. The acrid smell of spilled diesel became my alarm clock as I photographed fuel slicks, recorded noise violations, and noted boats anchored illegally in no-wake zones. If Priscilla wanted to play the safety card, I'd show her what real safety violations looked like. That's when Dr. Sarah Martinez from the Environmental Protection Group knocked on my door. She'd heard about my situation and came armed with charts that looked like evidence in a criminal trial. "We've been documenting water quality issues downstream from that marina for 2 years," she said, spreading contamination reports across my kitchen table. If someone could get us access to monitor the actual source, the implications hung in the air like morning fog. While building my environmental case, I made a discovery that would have made my uncle proud. Hidden in his correspondence from the 1990s were letters showing the marina had originally been public access. The HOA had gradually privatized it through legal maneuvers that looked questionable at best, fraudulent at worst. My uncle had fought this privatization every step of the way, keeping copies of original public access agreements and environmental impact studies. Reading his meticulous notes felt like getting battle plans from beyond the grave. Every letter, every legal filing, every environmental concern he'd raised was still sitting there waiting to be weaponized. The old man had built me a legal arsenal, and I was just now finding the ammunition. I remembered something a Coast Guard lawyer once told me about professional licenses being powerful leverage against people who live on their reputation. So I filed an ethics complaint against Priscilla's real estate license, documenting her harassment pattern and potential discrimination. State licensing boards don't mess around when there's a paper trail showing abuse of authority. My late-night law library sessions became routine, the musty smell of old legal books mixing with too much coffee as I traced property boundaries with surveyor precision. Every document I copied was another piece of ammunition. Every boundary line I verified was another crack in Priscilla's foundation. The brilliant part was watching her confidence crumble without her understanding why. She could see me building something, feel the pressure mounting, but had no idea how deep my uncle's preparation went. Environmental activists were asking questions about the marina. State investigators were reviewing her professional conduct. County officials were getting complaints about yacht club violations. By month 2, Priscilla was fighting fires on multiple fronts while I was still loading my biggest guns. She thought she was dealing with some angry veteran who'd eventually give up and move away. What she didn't know was that my uncle had spent 30 years preparing for exactly this kind of fight, and he'd left me everything I needed to finish what he started. The sound of yacht engines struggling to start in contaminated water was becoming my favorite morning soundtrack. Because pretty soon, those engines weren't going to be starting at all. By month 3, Priscilla was getting desperate, and desperate people make stupid mistakes. She hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. Apparently 20 years of honorable military service wasn't enough to satisfy her paranoia. The guy was about as subtle as a neon sign, sitting in his beat-up sedan taking pictures like he was conducting some top-secret surveillance operation. I waved at him every morning when I checked my boat, just to let him know I wasn't losing sleep over whatever he might find. Then she crossed a line that showed her true nature. Priscilla had my boat towed one Tuesday morning, claiming it was abandoned property because I hadn't moved it in 48 hours. Never mind that it was legally docked at my private pier. She'd twisted some obscure county ordinance to fit her agenda. Cost me $300 and a day of paperwork that reeked of bureaucratic revenge to get Rusty Anchor back. Her nastiest move was pure economic warfare. Priscilla started pressuring local businesses to blacklist me, claiming I was bad for community image. The marina fuel dock suddenly had pump problems whenever I showed up. The marine supply store developed mysterious inventory shortages when I needed parts. She was systematically trying to make my life impossible, hoping I'd crack under the pressure and disappear. While Princess Priscilla played these petty games, I was about to uncover the nuclear option my uncle had left me. Hidden in a safety deposit box were underwater property surveys from the 1960s showing that I owned not just the waterfront lot, but 2 additional underwater parcels that controlled access to the entire marina. The marina company had been paying rent to the HOA for 15 years, to the wrong people. Reading those surveys felt like finding buried treasure. These underwater parcels were positioned like a bottleneck at the marina entrance. I remembered my uncle always saying that in coastal areas, water access rights are often worth more than the land itself, and whoever controls that access controls everything. Now I understood why he'd fought so hard to keep these parcels out of HOA hands. The legal implications hit me like a tsunami. Every yacht club lease was built on sand. Every marina fee Priscilla's HOA had collected was potentially fraudulent. Environmental permits would need complete refiling under correct ownership. I was holding paperwork that could unravel 15 years of her carefully constructed empire. My uncle's journals became my battle manual that weekend. He documented every pressure campaign, every attempt to force him out, every legal trick they'd used against neighbors who didn't fit their vision. His final entry, written months before he died, read like a prophecy. If they come after you like they came after me, remember that the most valuable rights are often the ones they forget to steal. Mrs. Bennett transformed from quiet neighbor into intelligence goldmine, revealing that fed-up residents had been secretly documenting HOA misconduct for years. "We've been waiting for someone with the backbone to fight back," she said, sliding me a folder thick with violation notices, discriminatory enforcement patterns, and financial irregularities. "That woman's been bleeding this community dry while padding her own wallet." Dr. Martinez's environmental testing was turning into Priscilla's worst nightmare. Water contamination levels were approaching EPA intervention territory, and I had documentation of dozens of unreported fuel spills and waste violations from the yacht club. What started as HOA harassment was evolving into potential federal criminal charges. During my morning coffee ritual, watching sunrise paint the water that shimmered with oil slicks from careless yacht owners, I realized Priscilla had been fighting a war she'd lost before it started. My uncle had built the ultimate legal fortress, and I was finally ready to use it. The beauty of underwater property rights is that most people don't even know they exist. Marina operators, yacht club members, even HOA dictators can spend decades thinking they control water access, never realizing someone else holds the actual keys to their kingdom. It's like thinking you own a building when someone else owns the only road to reach it. I made the call that would change everything. "Marina management, this is Jake Thornfield. We need to discuss your lease agreements immediately. Turns out you've been paying rent to people who don't actually own what you're renting." The dead silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. That afternoon, I walked down to my dock and watched million-dollar yachts bobbing peacefully in water they thought they controlled. The irony was delicious. All those fancy boats were about to become very expensive lawn ornaments, and their owners had no idea the trap was already closing around them. Priscilla's empire was built on stolen land, and the real owner was finally ready to foreclose. The musty smell of that bank vault will stay with me forever, because that's where I discovered my uncle had left me the nuclear option. Spread across the cold metal table weren't just property deeds. They were the keys to Priscilla's entire kingdom. 3 separate parcels, the waterfront house everyone knew about, and 2 underwater sections that formed a perfect stranglehold on the marina entrance. My hands were actually shaking as I read the handwritten note. "Jake, if you're reading this, they probably tried the same tricks on you they tried on me. Here's how you win." The underwater surveys hit me like a physical punch. For 15 years, the Marina Management Company had been paying rent to the HOA for property they never actually owned. It was like discovering someone had been collecting rent on your house while you were deployed overseas. My uncle had kept these parcels out of HOA hands, specifically to prevent exactly what Priscilla was doing to me. But the real bombshell was buried in the original 1960s development agreement. The marina's current private status was built on complete legal fiction. The original deal required public water access forever, not just for yacht club members, but for the entire community. The HOA had stolen this access through backroom deals that would make a mob lawyer proud. Every exclusive arrangement, every yacht club privilege, every dollar they'd collected was built on fraud. Reading my uncle's journals felt like discovering a war diary. He'd fought these same battles for 30 years, documenting every pressure campaign, every neighbor they'd driven out, every rule they'd twisted to grab more control. The final entry made my throat tight. "I kept these rights to protect future generations from the same harassment. Don't let them steal what belongs to the community." The environmental angle was even more devastating. All marina permits had been issued under fraudulent ownership claims. 15 years of yacht club operations had been conducted under invalid environmental authorizations. Dr. Martinez's contamination reports suddenly became federal criminal evidence instead of just neighborhood complaints. Sitting in that vault with fluorescent lights humming overhead, I realized the complete scope of what I'd inherited. This wasn't just property. It was justice waiting to be served. Every yacht moored at that marina was trespassing on my land. Every fee the yacht club had paid was rent money stolen from the rightful owner. Every exclusive privilege they'd enjoyed was built on stolen community resources. The power shift was so complete it made me dizzy. Priscilla thought she was bullying some random veteran with a boat problem. What she'd actually done was pick a fight with the guy who owned the ground she was standing on. I could shut down the entire marina tomorrow, demand 15 years of back rent, or require complete environmental remediation at yacht club expense. But my uncle's final lesson was the most important. Property rights are like icebergs. Most people only see what's above water. The real power is always hidden underneath. Use it to protect the community, not just yourself. The taste of stale bank air mixed with the sweet flavor of incoming justice as I carefully packed those documents. Priscilla had spent months trying to force me out with petty harassment and illegal fees. Now I was about to show her what real power looked like. Walking out of that bank, I felt my uncle's presence like he was walking beside me. He'd spent 3 decades building the perfect legal fortress, and now it was time to find out what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable HOA president. The war was about to end, and Priscilla had no idea she'd already lost. Time to assemble my war council and plan the final offensive. First call went to David Bennett, Mrs. Bennett's nephew and a maritime lawyer who practically salivated when I explained the situation. 15 years of fraudulent marina leases with environmental violations? Jake, this is the kind of case that makes law school professors weep with joy, he said. And considering what they put my aunt through, I'll take it pro bono just for the pure satisfaction of destroying them. David brought his partner Sarah Kim, an environmental lawyer who'd been hunting for exactly this kind of corruption case. Within hours, my kitchen table looked like mission control for D-Day. Legal briefs scattered like confetti, property surveys overlapping environmental reports, and enough coffee cups to keep a submarine crew awake for a month. The aroma of fresh legal documents mixed with increasingly stronger coffee became our battle anthem. Mrs. Bennett dropped her biggest bombshell yet. Jake, meet the silent witnesses. Turns out half the neighborhood had been secretly documenting Priscilla's reign of terror for years. Every bogus violation, every selective enforcement scam, every dollar that disappeared from community funds, we've been keeping records like the IRS preparing for Al Capone, she said, producing manila folders thick enough to stop bullets. These people had been building a criminal case without even realizing it. Our legal strategy was elegantly brutal. Step 1. Notify marina management that their lease was void because they'd been paying rent to property thieves. Step 2. Cease and desist orders for all yacht club operations until legitimate environmental permits could be obtained. Step 3. Demand an accounting of every stolen dollar from 15 years of fraudulent operations. I'd learned in the Coast Guard that when challenging invalid commercial leases, you hit them with everything at once before they can mount a defense. Rebecca Torres from the county newspaper showed up at my door like Christmas morning arrived early. I've been investigating HOA corruption for 2 years, she said, eyes lighting up as I showed her the documentation. This story could force the state legislature to finally reform HOA oversight laws. When do we go public? The financial picture was staggering. David's research showed marina revenues exceeding $200,000 annually, over $3 million in stolen community funds across 15 years. But instead of bankrupting everyone with back rent demands, we crafted something more elegant, reasonable lease terms that would fund actual community improvements instead of yacht club subsidies. While lawyers prepared paperwork, I handled the physical preparation. Security cameras went up around my property, partly for protection, partly because I wanted to record Priscilla's face when reality hit her. The sounds of contractors upgrading my dock mixed with the hum of marine fencing deliveries as we prepared for maximum visual impact. Dr. Martinez coordinated with federal agencies while reviewing water samples that looked like evidence from a crime scene. Environmental law doesn't care about neighborhood politics, she explained, pointing to contamination readings that would make EPA investigators pack their bags immediately. Pollution is pollution, and someone always pays for cleanup, preferably the people who caused it. The psychological warfare was my favorite part. Secret meetings with Priscilla's other victims revealed the true scope of her damage. The Martinez family, forced out over noise violations that were actually children playing. The elderly Johnsons, terrorized with daily inspections until they sold and moved to assisted living. Young couples driven away by discriminatory enforcement that mysteriously targeted anyone who didn't drive luxury cars. But the most damaging discovery came from community financial records. Priscilla hadn't just been collecting fraudulent marina fees. She'd been robbing community funds to subsidize yacht club operations. Pool maintenance cut, playground equipment broken for months, community events canceled to pay yacht club insurance premiums. She'd been stealing from every resident to benefit her wealthy friends while claiming budget constraints. Timeline was everything. David prepared simultaneous legal filings designed to hit like a coordinated artillery strike. Invalid lease notifications, environmental violation reports, federal complaints, and cease and desist orders all landing at the same moment. In maritime property disputes, he explained while organizing the legal bombardment, you don't give them time to think, just time to surrender. The beautiful irony was preparing alternative community access while planning Priscilla's downfall. Once we took control, public boat ramp access would be immediately restored, fair fee structures established, and a genuine community fund created for waterfront improvements. My uncle's vision of community-controlled marina operations was finally becoming reality. That final evening before launch, sitting on my dock watching sunset paint the water gold while yacht owners enjoyed their last night of stolen privileges, I felt 15 years of community injustice finally lifting. The diesel fumes and gentle lapping of waves against expensive hulls sounded like a funeral dirge for corruption. Tomorrow, Priscilla Weatherford was going to discover that some people don't stay down when you try to bury them. Priscilla could smell her empire crumbling because her next moves reeked of pure desperation. She called an emergency HOA meeting to permanently ban me from all common areas, claiming I posed a clear and present danger to community safety. The woman actually stood there with a straight face declaring my fishing boat a terrorist threat to their yacht club. The metallic screech of folding chairs and nervous coughing from terrified residents told me everything. Even her own supporters knew she'd lost her mind. Her biggest mistake was hiring Thompson & Associates, the county's most expensive law firm, to challenge my property claims. She'd convinced them I was some delusional squatter trying to steal marina access with forged documents. The irony was exquisite. She was hemorrhaging HOA funds to fight a battle she'd already lost, paying lawyer bills with money that technically belonged to me anyway. Then Priscilla dove headfirst into character assassination. She started whispering to anyone who'd listen that I had PTSD episodes and was potentially violent. She even called the VA mental health hotline pretending to be a concerned neighbor, trying to get me involuntarily committed. The desperation in her voice was so thick you could taste it like diesel fumes on a humid morning. While Princess Priscilla was busy destroying her own credibility, I was executing the most beautiful construction project of my life. Under the innocent guise of property improvements, I began installing what I politely called a privacy fence along my water access points. Perfectly legal on my own land, but positioned with surgical precision to create a choke point that would trap every yacht in the marina like premium fish in an expensive barrel. The fence went up post by post over 3 glorious days, each section hammered into place with the satisfying rhythm of incoming justice. By Wednesday morning, the primary boat channel was sealed tighter than a bank vault with chain link and private property no trespassing signs that sparkled like diamonds in the sunrise. The marina had become a very expensive parking lot, and I held the only key to freedom. Thursday morning's yacht club panic was better than Christmas morning. Engines revving desperately, boat horns wailing like maritime sirens, and voices raised in the kind of hysteria usually reserved for natural disasters. The acrid smell of burning diesel mixed with the sweet perfume of wealthy people's meltdown as they realized their million-dollar toys had become glorified pool decorations. Priscilla's phone exploded before 7 a.m., yacht owners demanding immediate action, threatening lawsuits, and generally having nuclear meltdowns like toddlers whose sandbox had been confiscated. She frantically called county officials to have my fence declared illegal, but you can't violate property laws when you're building on land you actually own. The sound of her increasingly shrill voice echoing across the water became my new alarm clock. The legal scrambling turned into pure theater. Priscilla's high-priced lawyers discovered that my property claims weren't just valid, they were carved in legal stone. Marina management immediately stopped paying HOA rent and started begging for direct negotiations with me. Yacht club legal threats evaporated faster than morning mist when their attorneys realized they had zero standing to demand access across private property they'd never owned. Rebecca Torres's newspaper expose, Marina Wars, When Yacht Club Privilege Meets Property Rights, hit like a bombshell. The online comments became a battlefield between outraged yacht owners crying persecution and regular residents celebrating someone finally fighting back against HOA tyranny. #Marina Meltdown started trending locally, as people shared their own stories of HOA harassment and overreach. The most satisfying part was watching Priscilla's power structure collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. Board members who'd rubber-stamped her reign of terror suddenly developed amnesia about their involvement. Neighbors who'd cowered in silence for years started publicly sharing their own horror stories. Even her husband Bruce began making elaborate excuses to avoid being seen with her at the grocery store. The pressure was eating her alive. Priscilla's trademark perfect appearance started showing stress fractures, hair slightly disheveled, makeup smudged from phone calls, that pristine white BMW looking like she'd been conducting crisis management sessions in the driver's seat. Mrs. Bennett reported seeing her pacing her driveway at 2 a.m., phone glued to her ear like she was coordinating wartime damage control. County officials found themselves trapped in bureaucratic quicksand. They couldn't force me to remove legal improvements from my own property, but wealthy yacht owners were breathing down their necks demanding action. The whole situation had become a legal puzzle with me holding every piece. Meanwhile, I maintained my neighborly charm, cheerfully waving at stranded yacht owners while offering helpful suggestions about crane services for overland boat removal. The symphony of frustrated marine engines searching for non-existent escape routes became my morning entertainment, especially when harmonized with Priscilla's increasingly desperate damage control calls. She still believed this was about a fence and some boats. The poor woman had no idea the real tsunami was still building offshore. With her yacht club hostages trapped behind my fence, Priscilla's desperation reached nuclear levels. She tried having my fence declared an illegal structure, claiming it violated imaginary setback ordinances. When that failed, she organized what she called community emergency meetings. Basically, angry rich people plotting in her living room, while the sound of their frustrated voices drifted across the water like the wails of expensive ghosts. Her economic warfare campaign became truly pathetic. Priscilla pressured every business in town to blacklist me, threatening to pull her real estate referrals if they served that dangerous veteran. She tried to get my bank to freeze my accounts, my insurance company to drop my coverage, even attempted to have my grocery store loyalty card canceled. The woman was so desperate she was weaponizing supermarket points programs. But then Priscilla crossed into genuinely dangerous territory. She started telling anyone who'd listen that I was planning to sabotage the trapped boats, claiming she'd witnessed me near the marina at night with explosive devices. Complete insanity, but it brought sheriff's deputies to my door for wellness checks. The officers looked embarrassed to be there, especially when I offered them coffee and showed them my perfectly legal construction permits. While Priscilla was busy destroying what remained of her sanity, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Bennett's late-night surveillance revealed that Priscilla had been meeting with known marina vandals, apparently discussing ways to damage my fence and blame it on equipment failure. She was planning actual sabotage while accusing me of the same thing. The woman had completely lost touch with reality. That's when I made the most important phone call of this entire war. "Rebecca, it's Jake. I need cameras rolling tomorrow night. Priscilla's about to do something that'll land her in federal prison, and I want it documented." The excitement in the reporter's voice was like Christmas morning. She'd been waiting months for this story to explode into something bigger than neighborhood drama. Dr. Martinez's environmental investigation had evolved into a federal case that would make Priscilla's other problems look like parking tickets. Water contamination levels were approaching Superfund site territory, and my documentation of unreported spills had triggered EPA criminal investigations. The yacht club's casual pollution wasn't just community vandalism anymore. It was environmental crime with prison sentences attached. The pressure cooker was about to explode. Marina management offered me a 50-50 partnership just to avoid bankruptcy from customer refunds. Several yacht owners were quietly hiring crane companies to remove their boats overland, abandoning the marina entirely rather than wait for Priscilla's war to end. The smart money was jumping ship faster than rats fleeing a sinking vessel. But the most satisfying development was watching Priscilla's world collapse in real time. Her husband Bruce had moved out completely, filing separation papers that cited irreconcilable differences and public embarrassment. Her real estate license was under state investigation for ethics violations. Even her closest HOA allies were scheduling sudden vacations to avoid being associated with her increasingly unhinged behavior. The smell of her desperation was stronger than diesel fumes on a windless day. Mrs. Bennett reported seeing her wandering the marina perimeter at 3 a.m., talking to herself and occasionally screaming at the trapped boats like they were personally responsible for her downfall. The perfectly controlled HOA president had devolved into the neighborhood crazy lady in less than 6 months. Local media attention had exploded beyond anything I'd imagined. Marina Wars was getting picked up by regional news networks as a symbol of HOA reform movements across the state. Television crews were camping out, interviewing everyone from yacht owners to environmental activists. Priscilla's attempts to spin the story were backfiring spectacularly as more victims of her harassment came forward publicly. The financial bleeding was accelerating. Legal bills were draining HOA reserves faster than a torpedo hole in a battleship. Yacht club members were facing thousands in storage fees for boats they couldn't move. Marina management was hemorrhaging money on refunds and reputation damage. Everyone was losing money except me, and I was sitting on property rights worth millions. Town officials finally scheduled the emergency meeting everyone had been demanding, promising live television coverage and public comment periods. The community center was already booked beyond capacity, with overflow crowds expected. This was Priscilla's last chance to salvage something from the wreckage of her empire. But I had one final surprise waiting for her. David Bennett had prepared documentation showing that the HOA's insurance policy was void due to fraudulent property claims, meaning every yacht owner could sue individually for damages. When that bombshell hit during the public meeting, Priscilla's remaining support would evaporate like steam from an overheated engine. The taste of salt air mixed with the sweet flavor of incoming justice as I watched sunset paint the trapped yachts gold. Tomorrow night, Priscilla Weatherford would finally face the community she'd terrorized for years, and this time, she wouldn't be controlling the microphone. The community center was packed like a sardine can when I walked in that Thursday night, the smell of nervous sweat and burnt coffee mixing with the electric tension of a crowd hungry for justice. 3 television crews had claimed the back wall, their cameras tracking every movement like predators watching prey. County Commissioner Williams sat in the front row looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, while Sheriff Deputy Martinez stood by the door with the weary expression of someone expecting trouble. I entered with David Bennett carrying a briefcase that clinked with the sound of 15 years' worth of evidence, and Dr. Martinez clutching environmental reports thick enough to choke a whale. The crowd's nervous chatter died to dead silence as we took seats directly in Priscilla's line of sight. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the fact that her hands were trembling like autumn leaves in a hurricane. Priscilla opened with the performance of her lifetime, gripping that podium like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "We're here tonight because one selfish individual has decided to terrorize our peaceful community," she began, her voice carrying the fake authority of someone trying to convince themselves they still had power. "Mr. Thornfield moved into our neighborhood and immediately began destroying everything we've built with frivolous lawsuits and property destruction. She painted me as an unstable outsider holding the community hostage, claiming my fence would bankrupt the marina and destroy property values. This man's so-called property claims are completely fabricated forgeries designed to steal community assets," she declared, pointing at me like I was a wanted criminal. The desperation in her voice was so thick you could spread it on toast. That's when she made the mistake that would end everything. "The marina has been legally operated by this HOA for 15 years, and we won't be intimidated by fake documents from some disgruntled veteran who can't handle civilian authority." The room went dead quiet. Even the television cameras seemed to stop humming. Time for the mic drop moment I'd been rehearsing for months. I stood up slowly, letting the silence stretch until you could hear people's heartbeats. "Priscilla, I want to thank you for that introduction, because now everyone's going to witness exactly who's been lying to this community for 15 years. David handed me the briefcase, and I pulled out the underwater property surveys like a magician revealing his greatest trick. These documents prove I own the underwater parcels that control marina access. For 15 years, you've been collecting rent on property you never owned, stealing over $3 million from this community." The collective gasp sounded like air escaping from a punctured balloon. Yacht club members started whispering frantically while Priscilla's face went from perfectly made up to corpse pale. But I was just getting started. "Dr. Martinez, please share your environmental findings." The scientist stood up with reports that made EPA violations look like parking tickets. 15 years of illegal fuel dumping, unreported contamination, and water pollution that poses health risks to every family in this community, she announced with the authority of someone who documented every crime. The room exploded like a bomb had gone off. Yacht owners shouted denials while longtime residents demanded answers about health cover-ups. Commissioner Williams called for order, but his expression showed he knew this had become a federal case requiring damage control. But my favorite revelation was still coming. "The beautiful part, Priscilla, is that your HOA insurance is void due to fraudulent property claims. Every yacht owner can now sue you personally with no protection." That's when Priscilla completely shattered. She started screaming like a banshee about persecution and conspiracy, claiming I'd forged everything and bribed officials. This is all lies from a dangerous, unstable veteran. I've been protecting this community from his threats for months. You're all being manipulated by a mentally ill criminal. The crowd turned on her like sharks smelling blood. Mrs. Bennett stood up with her thick folder of documented abuses, reading violation after violation, while other residents joined the chorus of finally speaking their truth. Years of suppressed anger erupted as story after story of harassment poured out under the harsh glare of television lights. Sheriff Deputy Martinez stepped forward as Priscilla's rants became increasingly unhinged. "Ma'am, I think you need to calm down," he said, but she was beyond reason, screaming about conspiracies and veteran terrorists until her voice cracked. "Here's my proposal," I said when the chaos finally died down, my voice carrying across the silent room like a closing argument. Community-controlled marina with fair access for everyone, environmental cleanup paid for by those who cause the damage, and transparent HOA operations that serve residents instead of enriching board members. The applause was thunderous. Priscilla stormed out screaming about lawsuits and persecution, but everyone could see the truth now. Her 15-year reign of terror was over, broadcast live for the entire county to witness. The aftermath was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion, except every falling card was pure justice. Within 48 hours of Priscilla's televised meltdown, she resigned from the HOA board in disgrace, while the Marina Management Company practically crawled to my door begging for new lease terms. The yacht club agreed to fund complete environmental cleanup rather than face federal prison time, and suddenly everyone wanted to be my best friend. The transformation happened with breathtaking speed. We reopened the marina with genuine community access for the first time in 15 years. The sound of families laughing replacing the entitled complaints of yacht club members. Kids learning to fish from the public pier, weekend warriors launching kayaks, elderly couples enjoying sunset cruises they could finally afford. The water came alive with the community spirit my uncle had always envisioned. Mrs. Bennett's landslide election as HOA president brought transparency that would have made government watchdogs weep with joy. Her first act was implementing open-book financial policies and resident oversight committees that made future corruption impossible. The silent witnesses evolved into community guardians, ensuring no future dictator could terrorize their neighbors. The smell of fear that had hung over neighborhood meetings was replaced by the sweet aroma of actual democracy. My boat, Rusty Anchor, became the unofficial mascot of our revolution, kids waving from shore when I headed out for sunrise fishing trips that started this whole adventure. The marina buzzed with activity from dawn to dusk. Teenagers learning to sail, families teaching kids to water ski, fishing guides bringing in tourist dollars that benefited everyone instead of just yacht club members. The sound of diverse voices and genuine laughter had replaced Priscilla's authoritarian silence. The legal reckoning was absolutely delicious. Priscilla's real estate license was permanently revoked after investigators uncovered years of ethics violations and discriminatory practices. Her divorce became tabloid entertainment for the local newspaper, with Bruce citing public humiliation and financial misconduct in court filings. She fled the state like a criminal skipping bail, last seen trying to rebuild her reputation in some unsuspecting community that had no idea what was coming. Dr. Martinez's environmental cleanup became a federal success story, attracting university partnerships and government funding that transformed our contaminated marina into a model ecosystem. Fish populations returned that hadn't been seen in decades, water clarity improved dramatically, and the whole area became a living laboratory for coastal restoration. The EPA actually uses our recovery as an example of how communities can reverse years of corporate environmental damage. But the most meaningful transformation was personal. The Thornfield Maritime Heritage Scholarship now funds Coast Guard families' education using marina revenues that once disappeared into yacht club bank accounts. Our annual Community Marina Festival celebrates victory over corruption while honoring the waterfront traditions my uncle died protecting. Every scholarship recipient, every family enjoying affordable marina access, every kid learning to fish from our public pier carries forward his legacy of community over privilege. Property values soared after we eliminated artificial yacht club restrictions, proving that community access creates more wealth than manufactured scarcity. Young families flooded in, attracted by affordable marina access and transparent governance. The neighborhood transformed from an exclusive enclave for wealthy retirees into a thriving community where working families could afford waterfront dreams. The ripple effects spread far beyond our little marina. Our story inspired HOA reform legislation, property rights advocacy groups, and communities across the state fighting similar battles against neighborhood dictators. Former victims of Priscilla's harassment returned as community leaders, and families driven out by discriminatory enforcement came home to find neighbors who celebrated diversity instead of punishing it. Every morning, sipping coffee on my dock while rusty anchor bobs in water I fought to keep free, I'm surrounded by the sounds of a community that finally belongs to the people who live in it. Kids fishing where yacht owners once demanded silence, neighbors helping neighbors instead of reporting violations, and the gentle lapping of waves that carry no trace of the corruption they once reflected. The taste of salt air mixed with victory never gets old, especially when it's seasoned with the knowledge that bullies don't always win. Your turn. Drop a comment sharing your worst HOA nightmare, because trust me, you're not alone in dealing with power-hungry board members who think a clipboard makes them dictator. If this story fired you up to fight back against unfair treatment, smash that subscribe button and join the HOA Stories family for more tales of ordinary people defeating extraordinary bullies.
We appreciate you spending your time with us on HOA Stories, where HOA Karens finally get checked. If you enjoyed today's drama, hit like, comment on your favorite part below, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll be the first to catch our next HOA Showdown.